Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Bechdel Theatre podcast. I'm Pippa.
And I'm Beth.
And we're your hosts. So today's episode was originally intended to be a smaller segment in a much longer episode called Bring a Feminist Friend, which is where we encourage a podcast listener to take a non-theatre goer to see a stage show to create a dialogue outside of our own theatre bubble. This week, we focus on An Evening to Launch Homegrown and The Diary of a Hounslow Girl with our friends Firdos, who's a playwright, and her hashtag Bring a Feminist friend, Shaneela, who owns her own perfume business, The Scented Souq. So, to give some context on the first event we went to, the National Youth Theatre recently cancelled their upcoming production of a play called Homegrown by Omar Al-Qamar&nbsp. The play was created with and featured the voices of over 100 15 to 25-year-olds, exploring themes of radicalisation and inspired by news stories about young people leaving London to fight in Syria.
So during the rehearsals of this production, the police were called, and allegedly because of rumours of an extremist agenda and concerns for the safety of the young people involved. So the event that we went to specifically was an evening to launch Homegrown, as the play is now published as a script and is looking for a venue that will produce it as a full show. The evening consisted of a panel discussion about censorship, followed by a surprise performance of parts of the play. The conversation that we had with Firdos and Shaneela about their responses to both Homegrown and Hounslow Girl became so in-depth that it warranted its own episode. So we really hope you enjoy hearing what they had to say as much as we did. Over to you, Firdos and Shaneela.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Bechdel Theatre podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Pippa.
And I'm Beth. Hello. Art dealing with the Muslim problem is branded urgent, brave and provocative, but who's doing the provoking? Who's getting provoked? And is such work helping move popular narratives beyond the confining parameters of good Muslims and bad Muslims?
I'm Firdos Ali, a playwright living in London. I just recently finished a commission for Tallowa Theatre and I'm currently writing a musical.
And you also got Bunker Without Borders.
Yes, early April, the 4th of April to the 8th of April. The Bunker Theatre in London, London Bridge, is going to have a 4 or 5 day festival with lots of diverse voices, plays, monologues, music, dance, spoken word, and I've helped organise that. So it starts on the Tuesday the 4th and ends on Saturday the 8th of April. So come along.
My name is Shaneela Rowah Al-Qamar and I'm a writer as well as a businesswoman. And I've just recently, I'm working currently in a series of short series of books, as well as one book which is about Egypt, a collection of short stories. And I've also just launched a new fragrance line.
The reason we ended up crossing paths was because I was interested to go and see this evening to launch Homegrown. Homegrown being a play that was written for and in collaboration with the National Youth Theatre, so working with 16 to 25-year-olds, and it was lots of publicity around it in the newspapers, especially around kind of the theatre world, about how the play had been censored, because it was initially supposed to be performed by National Youth Theatre actors in a school, and it was well into rehearsals, and then there was all these rumours about the police being called, and it just got shut down and silenced, basically. And this event was the first chance that the public had to hear and read any of the content of the play.
Can I just jump in there? I didn't get to see the evening to launch Homegrown, but so it was originally going to be staged. It was with the National Youth Theatre and it was going to be staged in a school.
Yeah.
And then you said that the police were called? Like, who called the police? I'm
We don't know.
confused. Oh, okay.
It's really...
Yeah.
The whole background to the evening, like the event, was confusing even. Okay, so what they said it was going to be, the words of Nadia Latif and Omar Al-Qamar, who were the director and writer of the play, said, Muslims are only ever the object in an endless national conversation around Islam, rarely invited to define their own narratives. Homegrown probed, pushed back, hoped to move representations of Muslims beyond simple caricatures and crude Orientalist fantasies. For trying to do that, we, that's the creators of Homegrown, feel we were censored. The evening was presented in a panel discussion. There was 4 panellists. So they had a discussion that was about freedom of speech, and then they opened up the floor to the audience, and I don't know if either of you wants to describe the experience of what happened next.
Well, my initial reaction was, what's going on here, kind of thing. I think the way that the panel had actually opened it out to the floor made us believe that, you know, no one on the floor was actually actors, or actually people, members of the public as part of the audience. It became very apparent to me that it was quite scripted, and that, of course, these people were actors. I found the concept was quite interesting in the way, in terms of the theatre side of things, but the things that were coming out of the mouths of these people were quite astonishing.
It became obvious that it was a kind of performance. I think one of the writers called it a guerrilla performance. But I think it's really important that what they were presenting wasn't introduced. We weren't given a context for it. It wasn't announced that now we will have an extract from the play. They sort of stood up, said these things, and then sat down again, and then the chair of the panel said that was an extract from the play.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what was... So they had this chat on censorship, then they had this fake thing where actors got up. Like, what were they saying? Were they contradicting the panel? Or, were they reinforcing?
The content wasn't about censorship. So the content was about... I found it just quite very disturbing. It was vitriolic. And also having people pop up all around you made it feel very real. I guess that was the point of it being immersive. But I just felt like if I had known, I wouldn't have wanted to have been there. And I did a couple of times feel the very strong need to just get up and leave, because I just felt like that's not what I was there for necessarily. And I don't think I got what I was there for, which was to understand what had happened. And I found it strange that those holes weren't filled for us, but this extract from the piece, which initially I realised very quickly it was staged, but I still didn't realise it was from Homegrown, because I felt the content was kind of heavily skewed one way, so the vitriol felt to me, but maybe that's because I'm biased, and I'll ask Shaneela if she felt the same. What I saw was more of the vitriol against the Muslims, which is why it was very uncomfortable for me. And if there was any kind of pushback against the vitriol, I found that it was quite watery and weak. So I felt like I was in the outside world again, within the wider context of what's going on socially and politically. And I just couldn't tie it into Homegrown, what it was about, and why it had been censored. I couldn't make the connections. It just, the whole thing felt very disjointed for me, and kind of unsatisfying. It just didn't get the juicy part of what had really gone down. And as a piece of work that they'd pulled out from the play, I didn't know, because I hadn't read the play and the script, whether it was representative of the wider piece and had done it justice or not. I can say that having been part of that experience, I would not want to go and see the play. That's what it made me feel. Yeah. But I'm definitely not one for censorship.
So do you think that my instinct from being on the outside of this is that it sounds like they really didn't look after any of their audience members and kind of tricked you, it seemed? It sounds like you kind of went in kind of hoping for one thing, and then it sounded like that you got completely something else that just didn't do anything to tell you about what you thought you were there for.
Yeah, I did. I mean, nobody had made any promises to me, but because it was very clearly stated as though it was censorship against Muslims, I felt like I was there to support that not happening. Yeah. But then when I heard more of the same of what I hear out and about on the streets and on the news and in the papers, I felt like I just didn't see the connection. So I did feel as though I'd been kind of lured into this thing, and I just had this experience which was very unpleasant. The two of us had to go and sit somewhere and kind of debrief and say, what was that? How do you feel?
That is really not okay. That is horrible. I really don't think that should have happened in any sense.
I think initially we were probably one of 4 or 5 Muslims in the audience.
Really?
I think.
Visibly, women.
Visibly
definitely,
Muslim.
yeah.
Visibly.
Yes.
What kind of, like, what's the numbers of the people who were in the audience? Kind of,
Oh,
could you
it must
guess?
be.
A couple of
Sizable.
hundred.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was
Oh, I
sizable.
thought it was, like, small.
Yeah.
Blimey.
But it did seem like the amount of planted actors was a majority.
They
Right,
did take
yeah.
up a lot of the...
Yeah.
So, yeah, because it was National Youth, right? I remember
Yes.
Beth was saying to me it started to seem like there was a lot of
It's a very young
people
audience.
in the actual audience
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, so the audience were quite young, and which might explain quite a few things. But obviously, being meant to be a classroom. But yeah, firstly, I thought, okay, I feel like a minority in this audience anyway, and I kind of felt like I don't know that expression. You know, you're looking in from the outside, as Firdos was saying, like, you know, fish in a fishbowl type of analogy, where I'm looking at watching people talk about me and what my views are, and what I am and what I am not. And I'm like, that's not the case at all. And I felt like I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to say something out of pure embarrassment, and then getting into a heated argument about it. And then obviously that there wasn't really the opportunity for us to speak anyway, because of the way it was structured and the way it was done. So
it's completely one-sided dialogue
yes, I
on
felt
their
embarrassed. I felt embarrassed. I felt like I wanted to leave. I wanted to get up and leave, but I didn't want to because, you know, I didn't want to cause myself embarrassment for leaving. Because obviously I'm a visibly Muslim person, so if I got up halfway, that would have caused a bit more controversial thing to do. So I did feel a bit like, you know, just cover me, let the floor kind of like, you know,
Swallow me up.
swallow me up,
that's
type of thing.
like,
But it was interesting as well, because it's confirmed, unfortunately, a lot of the things. Well, I won't say obviously it's represent the views that they had brought up were representative of every non-Muslim person in the UK, but it has confirmed that there is at least a percentage of people who have those views. Even though Brexit has occurred and all that, and all the things that's been going on in the world politically, being in a place, in a theatre space where you would think that you'd be safe from those political agendas or ideologies, you're not even in the theatre space either. So for me, going to see the theatre is a way to kind of escape from those political ideologies and the things that you see in the media or on the street or what people talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it really clashes with what they've proposed to do, which is go beyond caricatures of Muslim identity and, you know, represent a conversation around Islam. It seemed to be more about a conversation around Islamophobia, and it seemed to be, for me, like, I was looking at all these kind of white Christian views, or not Christian, but like non-Muslim views, going, you know, saying all these Islamophobic things, and I felt embarrassed, and I was worried, oh my gosh, what are my Muslim friends that I brought along thinking? Are they feeling like you said you were feeling? But then we'd been told in the panel discussion beforehand, like, Muslims are always painted as being like either radical and like aggressive and angry, or like really oversensitive, and like we need to protect them in a bubble. And I was like, oh god, am I being like really kind of stereotyping my friends who I've brought along with me as thinking that they're going to be really sensitive to this, and that I'm just being sensitive because as a white non-Muslim person I'm not aware of the level of Islamophobia, and it's like waking me up to it.
But you were uncomfortable.
I was uncomfortable.
You were uncomfortable with what's going on. Like, how can they think?
But maybe it's good that I was uncomfortable, because I probably need to know.
Like,
you're saying, like Firdos is saying, it's about, you know, it's like what you're encountering every day. But for me, it's not what I'm encountering every day. So, but if it was going to see a play exploring white Islamophobia, I wouldn't necessarily want to bring some Muslim people with me, because I would be more aware that might be disturbing and offensive and like not something that you want more of in your life.
But if they're making, if this play is supposed to be about Muslim women representation, they can't think that there aren't going to be Muslim women in the audience, and that's what
it feels like. That's what they.
And a lot of it started off was about Muslim women, wasn't it? Which for me is again and again that thing where it's like, okay, come for us over and over and over again. This is tedious. Can we come at it from another angle? And I know that somebody on the panel was saying that he felt that that we shouldn't kind of monocoddle Muslims and treat them as these sensitive beings. But he's not the one that is having to be under this kind of a scrutiny.
Yeah.
all
Exactly.
the time. So he's free to say, you can say anything you want about anybody, and but that freedom of speech and being able to say anything that you want to, we can't deny the fact that it has consequences in certain groups of people at during certain periods of time, no matter what's going on politically or socially. There are consequences, and therefore I think when these subjects are discussed, people need to be aware that that kind of content exists within it and might be heavily focused that way. I think they pull these pieces from the play as a whole, and just having it sit within itself, it didn't feel like it was... It felt very purposefully...
It wasn't
unpleasant.
a narrative. It wasn't a play. It wasn't a conversation. It was like an onslaught of really strong, controversial opinions.
It just sounds really aggressive and like an attack, but without for...
I mean, so I did I got the script and read the play afterwards, and there are some scenes like that, and there are also some other scenes that are kind of more positive. There are scenes with kind of like discussions between Muslim characters about kind of their own identity and a bit more complexity. There's a scene, and the fact that it's all set in the script, it's all very clearly staged in a classroom where the audience is separate from the like conversations that are going on. So I feel like if you were to go and see the play, it would be, first of all, these ignorant views are coming from the mouths of teenagers, kids, possibly in school uniform, which is very different to seeing it from the assuming adult person standing next to you in a theatre, and you're observing them kind of maybe expressing these opinions to each other, but you're not feeling like you're in the firing zone of those opinions. Also, kind of, but there were some really positive stuff, like Muslim characters discussing their identity, Black and Asian characters discussing kind of the differences between their identities. There's one scene where in a classroom, a bunch of the kids have to give up and give a presentation on their Muslim heroes, which is, kind of more what I was expecting from what they were saying about like getting beyond caricatures.
Yeah.
It was like the script that I read seemed to be more in depth than that. But
they shot themselves in the foot, really.
They did, because they've put you off buying it and reading it by giving you that experience of kind of the nastiness that made you feel that way.
I don't think there's an issue raising these stereotypical views.
Yeah.
If they only give us a chance to kind of address them as well. So if they had actually done what they did, but also opened to the audience, where me or Firdos could have kind of like chimed in and be like, well, no, let's address these issues now, and opened it like that, then I think that might have worked.
And create a conversation for the public and the audience, like how can we address these issues rather than just being like, I don't know, living up to their own stereotypes, trying to break down.
Because the Muslim characters within them, I think it was just like one or two of them were quite weak, and they didn't really kind of balance it, in a fair way.
This is just so worrying, I think, in terms of, about the representation of Islam, Muslim women, Islamophobia, and that this is what happens.
And the representation of this play in particular, because I don't feel like, from having read it and also from having kind of heard about what the writer and director and everybody, what their intentions behind it was, it seems like this event totally kind of backfired in that sense.
We sort of got lost in the battle to get rid of and face the censorship. The art got kind of lost in
the argument
and how it would come across to an audience, what they were trying to say, even by pulling out those pieces from the wider play. What would it mean? What were they trying to say to the audience that day, that night? I don't know if there was a clear intention for it, but the impact on us was, it didn't feel like it was for me. I didn't feel relevant to being there. I went there feeling very relevant and leaving thinking, another space where I feel I don't belong. Yeah. That's how it felt.
I think it's very relevant for people who, the typical person who has those Islamophobic views, and it would validate them, and they would feel very comfortable.
And not anyone else.
But ironically, I don't think those are the people who were involved in it. I think they were using those views. They were taking those views from what they'd seen on TV or whatever. But I don't think any of the actors involved in the National Youth Theatre production like that were representing those views actually hold those views.
No, I don't think so.
So are we assuming that? Because do you remember, I felt that that some of the people who were saying that were expressing their own views or their colleagues' views, actually. I didn't feel like it was separate, because it felt like they worked with the young people and got their own views, which is why I think the police got involved. I don't think that they were pulling them out of an external source. I think it was being generated out of themselves. And being in a room with all of these very intense, dark, negative emotions coming from young people, I'd probably feel nervous being in that kind of a space. Probably the organisers around it were probably feeling nervous themselves. I'm wondering if they could contain it, if this thing did make it to the public. What kind of a response would it have from the public? Would it be welcomed? Would there be demonstrations? I saw enough of it for me to think that if that went on stage, it would cause a fuss. I didn't find it to be. It didn't have anything to kind of soften it, a story, a journey. It wasn't anything. It just felt like it was just vitriol, like dialogue that would just keep coming.
It was dialogue, but without inviting audience participation, which I feel like the way they got it wrong is like they didn't present it as a piece of theatre, but they also didn't present it as an open discussion. They were kind of confused between those two things. So you felt like you had you couldn't get involved with it.
No, definitely not.
But
they framed it all wrong anyway.
You also couldn't sit back from it.
Because you're very much a part of it, whether you wanted to be or not.
Diary of a Hounslow Girl, which was another play that we went to see, and that was a much more conventional. It was a play. It was a story in a nice, cosy theatre space.
Really great theatre space.
Bernie Grant Art Centre, is it called?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And it was great. They had a really nice cafe, great performance space. Would definitely go again. Recommended.
And it was a solo show. It was a solo show with one performer.
But it was a teenage character, kind of in the same way as the homegrown characters were. Teenagers with, fiery kind of energetic personality, and, you're not always going to agree with or understand everything she says. But I could totally relate to her from the perspective of being like a Londoner, of being I remember being that age, of having those kinds of turbulent relationships with friends where you fall out, and it seemed to be much more, even though in the publicity material, again, it was talking about this kind of character as a representation of a Muslim teenager. It was a lot of it was just about being a teenager, and I don't know whether that's kind of a better way to go about it, is just to be like, look, this is a teenager, teenagers are teenagers, without being like, this teenager represents all Muslim women.
And when I say teenager, I mean to include a variety of identities, including a Muslim teenager. And I don't just need to, to separate the categories.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think and also it was really nice seeing her in her bedroom space as well. Like, I think that was very relatable as well, because it was just like, you're immersed in.
And there was no pressure on her to like represent in the way that the homegrown kids to represent British views and to like stage an argument. She was just a character in a story,
and therefore did that.
Everything that she did was a natural part of who she was and what her journey was. So that's far more, I guess. I couldn't relate to her, but that might be because I didn't grow up here and I didn't have those challenges. And
can you just tell us where you grew up?
I grew up in Dubai, so I've been here since I was 17. So being here, and I used to visit, so I knew what it was like, but going to school at 17, 18, I think I had to just deal with just being in a new environment, and so I just would not have had the same experiences that other people would have had. But I've seen a few plays that have got a young Muslim girl as the lead, or being written by one. And I think that there is a theme to these that slightly concerns me. And it's nothing to do with artistic merit, the capability of the writer. I find that there are going to be writers that will continue to write good work. And it's absolutely vital and necessary for all of those voices to be up there. But I am seeing that the things that get to production are the things that kind of speak to the narrative of kind of watering away and washing away of the identity and saying, we're like you, so therefore like us.
Right.
That's what I take away from them when I go and see them. But that's me as an individual. And a lot of it happens in and around Muslim women and what they should be wearing and how they should be behaving, and as though they have no agency or no voice. But at the same time, you have the European Court of Justice just last week saying it's no longer a discriminatory act for an organisation to say you can't be on staff if you're wearing the hijab or the hat that the Jewish men wear, or if you're wearing a cross. And you just think to yourself, well, what is this wiping away of people's
censorship?
They're just their identity. And if you want us all to be, if there is this centre position that we're all meant to be going, where is it? And who is this neutral identity that we're all meant to be? And wouldn't the world be such a dull, boring place if we were meant to be this neutral self, which is just like an impossibility for me. And I find when I talk to other Muslim women, and if they go and see things, they also pick up this underlying thing of, oh, the things that we're getting to see are things that are saying, accept us and like us because we're like you. But what if we're not like you? Can you accept us and like us? What if, where is that play? Where is that conversation? Do we all have to be the same?
Yeah.
Get meshed together into one big ball? It may be one way to live, but what about the other? So I'm slightly still not feeling like there's enough different voices and viewpoints happening. But certainly I enjoyed Hounslow Girl. I know Ambreen, she's now writing Pots, I think, which will be on quite soon.
Oval House.
Which I'd quite like to go and see. But yeah, I know that when I write certain things, there is this kind of a pushback to kind of tweak the thing a certain way, and then you think, why am I having to... So then there is this, so therefore this kind of feeling from the wider community where they're not convinced that the art that they're seeing is untampered with. I feel that, and I'm on the inside of certainly within the theatre world. I don't feel I'm allowed to just do me.
Do you think it's a pressure that particularly is on Muslim women when it comes to a lot of the conversations about representations of Muslims, whether it be stage, screen, being about visibility, being about talking about the hijab, and that being like an entire kind of shortcut to like your identity? Or
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is EastEnders. I know it's a bit kind of, but there was a character. They recently had a Muslim family in there, and I forgot the character's name. She was wearing a hijab, a Muslim, and without sounding judgmental, they weren't the typical. They weren't really kind of like leading Islamic lives, like the way, like Muslims usually would. Well, it probably sounds a bit judgmental, but it's like, as you just said, put a hijab on her and that's it, she's a Muslim.
Right.
But a hijab does not necessarily... I mean, we say that you can go and pray 5 times a day, but it doesn't make you a Muslim. It's not just praying. Praying and doing those actions doesn't make you a Muslim. It's all about the heart and every aspect of your life and how you live your life. So it's more of like a way of life as opposed to just being a whole bunch of rituals.
Yeah.
So, and I think... in the Western society, it's like, okay, so we will portray the rituals, we'll put the scarf on and make it look like Muslims or Islamic, but it's not really. So, like, for example, the characters in EastEnders who are meant to be Muslims, they go and sit in pubs. No Muslim with a hijab would go into a pub. That just doesn't happen. I mean, I never go to a pub. Never been to one in my life, ever. Maybe I've just passed through once when I had to use the toilet or something, but I've never actually gone in there on a social basis and sat in there and drunk in there. It's because it's not something I would do as a Muslim. There might be some other Muslims who do that, but again, that's, everyone's got their own belief system. So I think with Islam, it's like any other religion. Religion is quite unique and quite, personal. But when it comes to the theatre or to the screen or to the media, we're all kind of lumbered into this one viewpoint, and this is how it should be. So as long as you put the rituals there, you put the hijab there, that's it, you're represented. And I don't think that's the case at all.
And it still seems to be. I mean, I don't know much about the staff writers on EastEnders, but it's still through the Western eyes. It's still for like a white Western audience, a white audience. I mean, and it's. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that other people don't watch it, but you know, there's this thing with the arts is that you have, like, as you were saying, like the writing, but then it has to go through so many people, and at the end of the day, the product isn't representative of the heart of where it came from, and that you have to kind of fit to everyone else's eyes and ideas, and that's where so much of the identity gets lost. Okay, so I think it's time that we talk about some of our feminist faves as positive things to look forward to, people to mention, especially for our listeners, but also for each other.
I would recommend Deeya Khan, who's a Norwegian film director, CEO of Fuse. And she started something called Sisterhood magazine, where she wants Muslim women's voices globally to be represented in that magazine. Quite like to write for her at one point. So, I'd like to recommend her. And as always, Layla Hussein, my friend, who's always doing some good stuff against campaigning against FGM and violence against women and children. And finally, Edna Adan, who's this amazing woman who's in her late 70s, Somali origin, who was a midwife in Cardiff for years and years, went back to the Somaliland region and built a maternity hospital, has trained dozens and dozens of nurses, midwives, doctors, and has sent them out regionally now so that they can do the work in their communities. And she's a rock legend.
Wow.
That's an awesome list.
Yeah.
Amazing.
You do hear about these people and you're like, wow, what am I doing?
Yeah. Podcasting.
She retired and then started that new life for herself.
Amazing.
Wow. At 65, she said, I'm something new, and she built a whole hospital.
That's
amazing.
That's great. Well, the person I'm going to talk about, she's a bit controversial, Mona El-Tahawi. Many people don't like her. She's very active in the political kind of scene. A lot of her stuff I don't agree with. Like, she talks about the hijab and the position of hijab in society. She's an Egyptian-American journalist and writer. I think she writes for The Guardian as well. But yeah, she was campaigning against the Mubarak regime. She always talks about the Saudi regime and how they oppress women in Saudi Arabia and that kind of thing. Some of the stuff I don't really agree with, but then at the same time, there's not many figures, you know, well-known figures that are Muslim as well and that have the guts. I mean, what I like about her is that she has the guts to speak out and she's not afraid. She's very well spoken as well. So, but yeah, she's quite good. I want to check out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Who's yours?
I wanted to mention Guleraana Mir, who is writing currently a play called Coconut, which is about, I'm not sure how closely it's based on her own experiences, but in terms of people writing with their own kind of voices from their own backgrounds. As a non-practicing woman from a Muslim background, she is in the process of writing a play, which we were lucky to see a little preview of the other week, and it's very, very funny. It's about a woman, a kind of lapsed Muslim woman who is on the dating scene and trying to navigate her cultural identity and her family's religion with kind of wanting to date somebody that her family are going to like and that she can relate to on the aspect of being somebody who is, drinking and pork eating. And it's a comedy, but it is definitely a kind of... It shows an intersection of identities in Britain that I think is nuanced in a way that you don't necessarily have if it had been written by somebody who wasn't from that background and had those experiences.
Where's it going to be on?
Don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
We saw a preview. I saw a couple of scenes from it at the Park Theatre, and then we saw a full reading of it, which was looked like it was fairly close to being ready to be staged at Diorama Arts Studios. And it was a studio reading, but I think just with a bit of kind of budget thrown into it, it would be a great show. So I'll recommend that close to the time when it's an actual production.
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you guys here and also coming to see the plays with myself and Beth. So thank you, Firdos and Shaneela.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us. It's been interesting.
And you can find all their stuff online. We'll link it all in the bio and everything. But thanks, guys. Had an amazing episode.
Thank you. All the best with the others.
Thanks.
Yes, all the best.
Okay.